Calling all mental health providers. Looking to specialize in treating adolescents? Check out Psych's cognitive behavioral therapy courses. Receive specialized certifications and hone in on your skills. Get 1-year access to patient videos and worksheets that you can email or text to your clients to keep them engaged in between sessions. Plus, you'll be placed on the Psych registry, where consumers of mental health who are searching for certified providers that are specialized in their condition can find you. To learn more about CBT for adolescent training, visit psychhub.com/learning.
Hi, I'm Marjorie Morrison.
And this is Patrick Kennedy.
And you are listening to the Psych Hub podcast, The Future of Mental Health. American fashion designer Kenneth Cole has been making contributions to our wardrobes for over 3 decades. He turned a small business into a billion-dollar retailer, and his name is known worldwide. And while he admits that nobody needs what he sells, his products have made people everywhere more confident in their own 2 Kenneth Cole shoes. In 2020, Kenneth founded the Mental Health Coalition with the hope of enabling many more people to feel good in their shoes. The Mental Health Coalition is bringing together the nation's leading mental health organizations, brands, and individuals to end the debilitating stigma surrounding mental health and change the way people talk about and care for mental illness. Prior, Kenneth served as chairman of amfAR, the leading AIDS organization, for 14 years and is a UN AIDS International Goodwill Ambassador. He is also known for his work enabling 1.5 million Haitians to receive healthcare services in the wake of the 2010 earthquake. In this episode, we discuss Kenneth Cole's connection to the mental health crisis and what he and his organization are doing to combat it, along with the importance of being vulnerable. Here's Kenneth Cole.
Kenneth, we are so excited to have you here today. We've been really anxiously awaiting this.
Oh, thank you. It's a treat, Marjorie. And I love what Psych Hub represents. I love what it's doing. And I love the impact that it's making at such a critical time.
Everybody knows Kenneth Cole as a household name. So let's just start with getting all of that sort of out of the way. So how did you get involved in the fashion industry?
My father was in the shoe business. He had a small shoe factory in a tough part of New York at the time called Williamsburg. And I did that for a little while. And then I started my own business 38 years ago. The business is an extraordinary business, the fashion business, because it redefines itself every day and it contextualizes itself every day, because fashion is a relative expression. And what's fashionable to me isn't to you, and certainly isn't to Patrick. I say in jest. And what's fashionable to you today isn't necessarily tomorrow. So I think it's a great business in that regard. And every day you look at what you're doing and you try to make sense of it. If I could speak to people about not just what's on their body, but what's on their mind, I'll have a much more meaningful relationship. And that'll transpire any given trend, any season, any hem length, any heel height. And that's what I started to do. And I realized what we stand in is important, but not as important as what we stand for. And that has kind of defined my journey. And I started doing it a long time ago. And so I love fashion, and I started making women's shoes and then men's shoes. And I loved my customer. And so I had a choice of finding ways to find more customers or selling more things to the same customer. And I chose door number 2. Over the years, the business has diversified as far as product goes, and it's diversified geographically. And I found more people that I could connect to, and I had the privilege and the blessing of doing business in places I didn't know existed, selling products I didn't know people wore. And it's been an extraordinary journey. And so much of it has been with the marriage of, again, not just looking good, but doing good. And together, at the end of the day, everybody feels good and everybody is in a better place.
That's a really interesting way to think about it and to kind of get to someone's soul. And when you got into it, it just sounds like you didn't feel that way.
I didn't really know where it was going to take me, and I still don't. Every day it's a different experience. And shoes are probably the single hardest product to bring to market, and they don't fit any 2 people the same way, and they don't wear the same way on any 2 people. But I do think if I can connect with you, if you do feel good, invariably you're going to look better, and you're going to smile more. You're going to feel better inside your own skin. And then at the end of the day, you're going to look better. And in some ways, maybe it's challenged me to kind of look at people differently and get a sense of how they are and how they put themselves together. Every day you get dressed and you get to introduce yourself to the world totally unedited on your terms. And it's one of the only ways you can do that in the world today, because there's all these contextual boundaries that we have to adhere to. And most people don't get to know any more about you than how you introduce yourself in any given day, because I think for the most part, we live in mostly very superficial relationships. And so the question is, how are you choosing to say what to whom on any given day? And you make that decision every morning when you get out of bed. So I find that fascinating, the choices that people make, regardless of the path they take. So it is powerful. But then I say to myself, but how important is it at the end of the day, really? If you can't feed your family and you're not well and you've got issues, physical, mental, or otherwise, it's questionably relevant in any scenario. It's helped me and my associates, and I remind them every day that hardly anybody anywhere needs what we sell. So our goal is to make them maybe think they do. I'm glad they thought it, think it again. But more importantly, it's to speak to them and connect with them in a more meaningful way. And that's what I've always tried to do. And it's been an extraordinary platform for me. And I'm very lucky I've been able to use it for good in that regard, as you guys are.
I think that your insight to how we can revolutionize the way people look into themselves and evaluate what's important to them is so much more powerful, because you've been doing it on the periphery, outside of the complexities and biases that are within the quote mental illness treatment world, which still isn't kind of grappling with what is mental health and how are the two connected, and then of course how does that connect to overall health. So we have been really insular as a community, and it's been driven by that stigma, which has forced everybody to kind of operate in a very small world. And I have to tell you, it's, listening to you right now, it's clear why you can be a real value to the way we in the mental health world communicate what our value is to people, the way you on a daily basis think about how to connect to the consumer with a product that, as you admit, is not a life or death issue for them. And yet, as you know, consumers don't spend the time thinking about what is really important to them in this regard, because they've been put through this brainwashing that makes them think that there's something wrong with them if they're not feeling perfect, and that it's on them, it's their fault. It's part of our cultural bias that's been implicitly embedded in their thinking. So I just want to underscore, you're not a mental health guy per se, but you're a really thoughtful kind of how do you connect to consumers guy. And that is what we ultimately need for the mental health movement to move forward, so that we can actually tap into that primal thing that makes us want to stop and say, well, how much better can I look, right? How much better can this, 5, 10, you go by the bookstore, 10 ways to become richer, happier, more attractive, more connected, flatter abs, whatever. And then move towards what are the real ways that are going to help you feel better about yourself. And I love that pivot. It's a great, great narrative. Because otherwise people would say, well, what does Kenneth Cole know? He's this advertising kind of marketing guy. But that's exactly what we need in mental health, frankly, to clear away this bias that's implicit in everybody.
Thank you. I tell people that very clearly, and quote a disclaimer if you want at the very beginning. I'm not a mental health person. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a doctor, not a scientist. And I lived with this with my efforts in HIV for 30, 40 years. But what I am is I'm in the perception business. That's what I do for a living. And I'm also a good convener of people. And I'm good at aggregating and recognizing opportunities to bring people together. The biggest issue with HIV and I lived in that world for 30 plus years. And I was one of the original members of amfAR. And then I was its chairman for 14 years. And then when I got involved with this, people said to me, well, could you make an effort to do something like that in the world of mental health? And then I realized at the time that 1 in 200 people in the world still live with HIV, but 1 in 4 are living with mental health conditions. And then I quickly learned this, it's more like 4 in 4, because if it isn't you, it's somebody you love, somebody in your family, in the community, in the workplace. And then people were going to say that the stigma in relationship to mental health is like what it was with HIV 20 years ago. And how do you get people to engage and to talk about it and to express themselves and to find out how they feel and to put that out into the world? And if you could do it in HIV, this should be easier and maybe easier for you to relate, connect. And so that is part of what influenced this journey. And I'm not a threat to anybody. So we built this coalition of all these extraordinary organizations with real resources, of real professionals, of people who really do know what they're doing, and they service communities in ways that are so impressive and inspirational. Nobody's focused basically on changing the narrative and ultimately rebranding mental health, which is how I look at it as our goal. Everybody has a very real and important role to play, and it's providing a necessary service. And to the degree we can help amplify what they're doing, then we've played, I think, a meaningful role. And I did this with HIV before here. There were thousands of AIDS organizations around the world, but people they were working on treatment, on prevention, on cure, but people were not working on stigma. And that was what was making mental health issues so debilitating, as Patrick and you both know so well. And there's 2/3 of people live in the shadows and don't know how to find their voice. And I love that we've been given an opportunity to play even a little role here.
So great. Thank you so much. And, the military defines mental health as a force multiplier. They literally have more therapists, especially as you go up the ranks in terms of specialty operations, Green Berets, SEALs, SEAL team, and so forth. They all have more mental health because the military realizes they've put so much into these quote unquote special operators. They can't afford to have them not on their game when they're called into action. And so, as opposed to looking at mental health as something to be feared, oh, I'm going to be seen as weak, they see it as, no, this is my chance to try to overcome the psychological barriers that I'll face because I'll be put in a stressful foreign situation and have to operate at maximum ability and capacity. What a concept, right? And so as an advertiser, as a perceptions guy, wouldn't it be something if instead of people looking at mental health as, oh, it means you're half full, putting it in the context, as they say, instead of half empty, you're half full. And so that kind of insight that you can bring is really valuable because, as you said, so many people don't avail themselves to mental health, even if they do have access, which, as we know, is still lacking in most cases. But even if they do, they limit their own access by failure to ask for help because they're worried about the stigma. Stigma is so crucial to this.
He makes it sound like it's just very easy. And he's like, oh, yeah, I did it with AIDS. It brought, Convene, which is the best and the brightest of all the organizations that he has convened. So Kenneth, I would just love to hear a little bit behind the scenes. Like, what was the impetus for you was it personal? Was it that you just saw a need? What was it that you said, I've got to step up and I've got to lean in on these mental health issues?
My daughters truthfully pushed and prodded more here. And I mean, HIV is something that it became very personal, and it wasn't initially, but I realized an opportunity that I had to make an impact. And it just that opportunity kept growing. And then when I had stepped away and, as a company, we agreed to become a stigma-free company, which was a process that NAMI had put in place. My daughter did that on the company's behalf. And I learned a lot. And I didn't understand so much, and I still don't, and truthfully. And I talked to so many people today because we're doing this big thing in May, which we'll talk about in a little bit, to try to find my voice regarding my personal journey with mental health. And I've struggled with that because I've not known how to effectively engage with people at different and critical and meaningful moments in their journeys. And I've learned that it's not just about being a willingness to be vulnerable, but also to be empathetic at the right time and to know how to do that and or anywhere in between. And to the degree that we can help people figure that out, navigate that, it helps everyone. So literally it helps 4 out of 4. And that was pre-COVID. Now it's 5 out of 4 because it's your pets and everybody else now is struggling with mental health issues. And I think at the end of the day, somewhat to Patrick's point, I think that, you face it, you address it, you embrace it. And at the end of the day, we're stronger for it and we get through it. We get through it together. Also, I think one of the advantages that I have is as a business person, and I understand, well, there's a lot of basic business principles that we've kind of applied and I've brought to what I do. And I did it at amfAR and HIV, and now we're doing this mental health coalition. The ability to create scale and leverage and bring people together, and synergy is huge. And 1 + 1 equals much more than 2 if applied properly. And everybody wants the same thing. And as long as there's transparency, you can go so much further, so much less. What I often like to say is that it's an old African adage that alone you can go fast, together you can go far. And I believe that.
I'm grateful. I'm really grateful that you've decided to use your platform, and you did it in such a meaningful way, because we've learned a lot and seen a lot of people come in and try to solve very complex problems on their own. And I know you've seen it before too. And these are very hard problems. You can't solve them. There's no silver bullet. So the best thing that we can do is collaborate and convene and work together to exactly do all this. And it feels to me, because I'd love for you to kind of talk about in practical terms about the coalition. But I think what's so awesome and profound is all the partners, and then leveraging all that. So maybe if you could share with the audience what your goal for it was, what it is now, what you hope it to be in the future.
So initially, it was about changing the narrative. It was about rebranding mental health. That was the task that was put before us. I asked 5 psychiatrists for the definition of depression, and I got 5 different answers. And none of them were empowering. None were what anybody could use to discuss their struggles, because they were all diminishing. So there wasn't a way to kind of emotionally put yourself out there. So the goal was, how do we do that? And then if we are going to make that commitment, it has to be very significant and one that we needed to make as a group, because to try to go down that road and navigate that by ourselves I felt would be treacherous and not sure we'd get very far. So NAMI says, we'll support you. Come on, take this on. We'll support you. They had a board meeting. They all agreed, let's give this guy a chance to see what he can do. And so we did that. And it started with aggressive messaging. And then it became clear that everybody had different messages. And I didn't want to compete in the world of messaging. And I also realized that we couldn't do it with just NAMI. So we systematically started going to all the other organizations, and people took my call, and they systematically all said, we're in. There's really no reason not to be, because we're going to give you a collective voice, no charge, no strings attached. And so everybody said, we're in. So now we have built this community, most of whom have never sat across the table from each other. And most of them didn't really know what each other did. And only then do you find the synergies and opportunities, by the way, in the community. So now we have about 30 of the largest mental health service providers, all NGOs in the country. We convene regular conversations with them. And the commitment is everybody agrees to use their resources and their networks to help, move this narrative forward. But what quickly came to realize is that there was maybe another agenda in having this community, which we didn't initially set out upon. And there's extraordinary resources. And then one says, well, how do you ultimately marry needs to resources? Because apparently in this space, if you try to do it, someone says you got to go to 35 websites. And even then it's very hard, because you got geotagging and you got this. And if I'm in crisis, how do I figure out who to call and when and how? So then one says, well, maybe our bigger mission should be marry all needs to all resources. Aggressive, that seems like we'll die trying, but why not? A mission, you always contemplate that you don't ever really get there, but hopefully you get closer and closer. And then about less than a year ago, we started speaking to the Facebook people / Instagram, and it became frighteningly real about how all those needs can be aggregated so effortlessly, which I'd never contemplated before. And everybody's already geotagged, and everybody is already characterized, and we already know where everybody is, and that we already know everybody's communities. Like we don't, but they do, and these algorithms do. So Facebook says to us, let's work together, and we've got this emotional health resource center on our site, and we already have 6 or so of your partners' resources on it. Why don't we take your resource platform and just transport it all over and just maintain it for us? So that's great. So that's exactly what we wanted to do. It was a gift. So, and all of our partners now had a chance to bring their efforts to a larger audience. So we started that. And then 3 or 4 other initiatives are put underway. So one is ultimately changing the narrative. So we work earlier on, by the way, with Pentagram, who's this great branding organization, maybe one of the best branding companies in America. And I had used them at Sundance. And they say, we'll do this pro bono. We love the effort. We love what you guys stand for. We love what this could be. And a bunch of other creative people got on different points, got on the train and brought resources. We bring that and meet this guy, Mark Brackett, who's up at Yale. And he has this emotional learning platform, which is in 2,000 schools across the country. And we take this, what becomes called the mood meter, and transport it to Instagram. And now there is, what it does exist is a ability for anybody to go on, and there's a whole array of colors and shades of those colors. And you can put that filter, you could put a color filter over your profile at any point in time. And you could basically tell your small community or greater community how you're doing in a visual language that's non-stigmatized, it's non-clinical, and it over time becomes very intuitive. Then there's another platform called Reality Check, where you attach an emotion to these colors, and you can attach a message to it as well too, and you can send that to your smaller community or greater community. So those initiatives are underway, and a third one is what we call one-to-one, which we're going to do in May, which is going to be hopefully a very big deal for us, and where you're going to talk to somebody who you would ordinarily talk to and allow the world to hear it, engage with it. You're going to be vulnerable, hopefully, and or empathetic at the same time. And then we're going to have a mental health professional from one of our organizations to come on to that conversation about halfway or 2/3 of the way through and help contextualize that conversation so people can understand it. And what we're going to do, we're going to hopefully have a massive impact on stigma in this country in May. We're launching what we call Every Day in May. And we're going to have a different conversation with somebody else in the community. And they are going to do hopefully what we said, and they'll do it in a language that they speak to whom they would speak it ordinarily. And hopefully people can relate to it. People will come to it, and we'll find ways to get those messages out there. It's very ambitious, but so stigma hopefully gets better. And ultimately in this platform, if people engage with it, one day we can connect all needs to all resources.
I had no idea the level of those different initiatives. And it's really brilliant because they're very different, right? The colored one, the first one, is pretty easy. And then to take it one step further and to attach an emotion to it, and then to go one-on-one, it's like they build off of each other. And I love what you said earlier about vulnerability, because from my opinion, I think stigma is really starting to go away, especially when we talk about younger generations. But and Patrick knows this as well, I'm obsessed with empathy, because I think this lack of empathy is causing so many problems in our country, really in our world, everything from race to politics, this lack of being able to understand where someone else might be coming from. And when you use words like, I love how you said, how they're doing to be vulnerable or empathetic. And I think all of those matter so much. And we're initiating something in our company where on Fridays, we're going to start to tell in our team meetings about a risk that you took during the week. And when I was talking to our leadership, I said, I did it with my kids growing up. I'm Jewish. Every Friday night we did Shabbat, something good that happened in the week, something bad, a good deed. And then we added a risk because I wanted to raise kids that were willing to take risks, fall a little bit, or be vulnerable. And I decided as a company, I wanted to create a culture where we supported each other's vulnerabilities and take risks and be, and whether they work out or they not, and they could be as little personal life or not. So I think all of these things matter almost one step more than stigma, because it's really about community, right? It's about being okay to say, I'm not okay, and then being there for somebody else. And you're doing it on the massive platform of Instagram, which is amazing.
Yeah, I'm trying to do it. So is this, by the way, I should say, is this your risk of the week is this conversation?
I don't know. I take a lot of risks these days. It might be. I will have to let you know on Friday. As of Tuesday, we might be there, but yeah, by Friday, who knows what kind of mayhem I'll get myself into.
But look, this is, these are roads untraveled in many ways. And I think that Patrick's been a leader to our degree. He's paved the way for a lot of us now to kind of find our path, find our voice. And he was willing to be vulnerable when few would, and much earlier on. But it's still not something that is easy for a lot of people. I mean, men specifically. Men, I understand, are categorically have a much tougher time being vulnerable, being emotional, and expressing themselves. Black men and Latino men and Asian men, I'm hearing now, it's very hard. Culturally, it's different everywhere, and I think we've got a ways to go. But to the degree you make it easier, and you have examples and role models and people you respect, and you see them do it. I did my one-to-one, by the way. It was kind of like a demo, and I did it with my brother-in-law, Chris Cuomo, and you can see it on my Instagram page, and I think on his. And I said to him afterwards, "Why are you?" He's on national television every night. I said, why are you so comfortable being so vulnerable before this massive audience? He says, because I don't give a shit what people think, and you do. And I said, you're right. And but I'm getting better at it. And but there's not a lot of Chris Cuomo's out there. And I think that's part of taking off that coat and shedding a layer and exposing yourself. It's hard.
We will be back in a minute. If you like this interview and you want to hear others, follow us on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. You'll be able to catch up on episodes you may have missed, like our conversation with Dr. Ken Rosenberg on sex addiction, and you'll get new ones delivered directly to you. More with Kenneth Cole right after the break.
Whether you treat mental health or you just want to learn more about your own mental health, Psych has educational resources for anyone and everyone in between. If you're a provider looking to get trained in cognitive behavioral therapy or want to help out a family member or colleague, our specialized certifications give you in-demand skills and boost your qualifications. Plus, they are self-paced so you can take them on your own schedule. Visit psychhub.com/learning to get started. So where do you want to go?
Every day I wake up and I try to figure out how do I make sense of it all, because, there's so much I want to do and so much we all want to do. And we have so little time. I was talking to somebody today how, you can lose all your money, but you can make it back, but you can't get back the time. And how do we use it in a way that's meaningful? And that is what I struggle with. And I think I have a platform that I've tried to use it in a way that it connects with people in meaningful ways. And, people say, well, do you do all this stuff so you could sell more shoes? And the answer is no. But the fact that I'm able to do it is why I do it. It's not that I could do more business, but the fact that it doesn't hurt the business. In fact, it probably helps, but I don't know that, is why I'm able to do it. So, and I think it makes my associates feel better about what they do, and we all work a little harder at what we do, and we try to connect people in a more meaningful way. And and I struggle because I think I speak to young people a lot, and especially today, young people coming out of school and they're lost, and where do I go? What should that first step look like? And I often try to tell them it doesn't matter that much, because what you do is not who you are, and just know that. And it's a tool to what you want to be, and just keep that in mind. To me, it was about community, it was about business, it was about my family. And I found a way to bring a lot of them together. And I'm able to do a lot of that at the same time. So as I'm building the business, I'm at the same time serving the community, which I love that I can do, and with members of my family whenever I can. Because I find otherwise if I don't, it's hard. I'm sure you guys do the same things personally. And growing up, everybody learns quickly that you need to put more than 40 hours into your path, into your career, if it's going to really be something. And you need to bring emotionally more to it, not just the hours, and you're going to have to make compromises. And then at the same time, if you want your family and personal life to work, that's going to take making compromises. So at the end of the day, nothing just happens in the ordinary course. You got to make it happen. So I've been fortunate and been in a position where I could, marry a lot of those resources and efforts. And I've done that, whenever possible.
Well, Kenneth, it's interesting that politics today is obviously so marked by tribalism and polarization and rejection and intolerance and everything. I mean, I just can never, but growing up the way I grew up, thinking that, the uber goal in life is to get involved in politics and to be part of the political process as a means of self-expression and being part of that bigger life that, I think is intuitive to us as human beings. You've really articulated in just the last minute that, and we're seeing it actually politically, where businesses are making the decisions politically for the country in many respects, especially in the wake of George Floyd and the worries about, the historic racism and lack of equity. We're not waiting for governors and the Oval Office to tell us what to do, right? Like businesses are stepping up because their employees, because like you said, it's critical to business to have a social compact with the people you work with, right? Around a set of values that can change the world too. And of course that's antithetical to the way I thought growing up, which is no, it's Washington that makes the changes. You're pointing out, and it's important for me to hear myself say this because it really is important. Like when you see, Major League Baseball move their All-Star game out of one state they've always been in because that state politically is rejecting equal enfranchisement of all voters based upon the color of their skin and saying, we're out of here. I mean, oh my God. I mean, as someone who loves to see things happen, and I'm used to seeing it happen in the Capitol, but to see it out in the business world, it's really something to watch.
People used to say to me, Patrick, because I've been doing this for so many years, and I ran a public company for 20 years on the New York Stock Exchange, and people would say to me, well, and shareholders would often say to me, do you have the right to service a corporate agenda? And I would always say to them, business and community are not only not unrelated, they're interrelated, and they're in fact interdependent, and they are the proverbial hand that feeds each other. And I also believe that every business is going to get there, and every business is going to realize it. If their balance sheet, if their hearts don't get them, the balance sheet will, and hopefully it'll be the former. So, I guess also to Patrick's point, business, government has become very, it's so partisan by nature. It's presumed, even if it isn't, it's presumed to be by nature that. And people would say, well, so much of your issues that you talk about are political issues. And I say, nothing I talk about is political. Know that. I mean, a lot of what I talk about has been politicized. But these are human issues, they're social issues. They're not political issues. And I am so adamant and so intent on making sure that my narrative isn't referred to or thought of as being a political one, because it's immediately discounted by 50% of the audience, if not more, and challenged often by half of the other for reasons that have nothing to do with what you're doing. But these are interesting times right now. It's very hard to address a lot of these problems in Washington or in these state houses. I mean, there are very strong leaders who've been affected, but it is very hard.
Yeah,
I do think you can do a lot in the private sector. And if you really want to make social change, you really want to make impact, you can do it without all the regulatory oversight, without all the process as a private person. And you can make an impact in people's lives, and which is a gift.
Because of COVID, we've really come to a cultural moment where we're trying to decide as a society who we are. Of course, we've had so many of these moments with the kind of insurrection and the polarization politically and the COVID and the racial pandemic and the reckoning with our past. I mean, it just keeps going, as you know. And I'm trying to think, like, as they're talking about basic human values, there's got to be a movement in here about, spiritual connectedness and values. I mean, as they said, in my experience in COVID, it made me do things that I wasn't planning on doing, which was to spend a lot more time with my family, and I was out there, go get them, trying to get, and it just shut my life down. Now you can look at it in the negative, but in the positive, I know I have a degree of connection with my family that I wouldn't otherwise have had, because it was beyond my ability to stop myself in my own tracks from getting on that next plane ride. And if I look back on it with that perspective of gratitude, then I think to myself, thank God that God took me off the merry-go-round for a minute. Now the question is, am I going to jump right back into it? That's where I have to be more intentional now. And so all I'm saying is, I think collectively as a society, we're trying to figure out what this is going to mean for us as a human community. And that's not the mental health question, but mental health is tied to our spiritual lives, and that's tied to who we are as people, because we're all spiritual beings. So I hope we find that connection that binds us again, because everything else seems to be pulling us apart from each other. Anyway, it's good to be on the journey with you, Kenneth. I really appreciate your having joined us today.
We always like to ask our guests before we wrap up, if you had a magic wand and you could change anything in mental health, what would you do?
I would make it okay to not be okay. If people could accept who they are for what they are, and they could feel good in their own shoes, and because invariably they're going to fit you up better than somebody else's.
That kind of summarizes, I think, so much of what we talked about, of not worrying about being judged, and just kind of you being you, which is so much easier said than done, right? And so many times it depends on who we're with and the time of the day and all things like variables on that. But you are a true contribution to this world. And I just sit here and I think to myself, I can only imagine how many lives that you have touched, just in so many of the different things that you've done. I mean, it really, really is remarkable. It's just, thank you. And just keep sharing what you're doing so that more people can emulate you and step up and rise up and use their voice and use their platform. And I would say on behalf of all of us, I thank you for the contributions you're making to mental health. It's really making a difference. And where could our listeners go to find out more about the coalition and to find more about you?
So they could go to the mentalhealthcoalition.com and also on Instagram. And you'll see our resources all there. You'll also see them on Instagram as well. I just want to kind of give you guys a book too. I love this vaccine initiative you're doing. It's so important.
Thank you so much, Ken, for being on here and for all you do.
I look forward to working with you, and keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Thanks.
What's cracking, Hope Nation? It's your friendly neighborhood Kevin Hines, and here's your Psych Hub Brain Health Tip of the Week. Today, we're making a stress reduction plan. When you recognize that you're stressed, remember these 3 tips. Identify the situation. What is stressing you out? Acknowledge your signals. How do you feel about the scenario? List your options. What can I do about the situation? You can either change the situation. Do you have to be involved? Change your reaction to the situation. Use healthy coping techniques and strategies and mechanisms. Change how you look at the situation. Reflect on it from a different angle. Everyone has stress. It's inevitable. However, when you're constantly reacting to stress without countering its effects, it can threaten your well-being. There's also good stress that can help you get better.
As always, thank you for listening to our podcast.
If you enjoyed the show, drop us a review.
If you haven't already, subscribe to our podcast for the latest episodes.
For the latest insights, check us out at psychhub.com.
You know that airplane metaphor of putting on your oxygen mask first before you help someone else? Mental health is no different. In order to take care of others, you have to help yourself first. But what does that look like? Take Psych Hub's Mental Health Ally certification for starters. It's 8 one-hour courses covering anything and everything, from substance use to diversity in mental health to suicide prevention and more. Plus, it's self-paced, so you can take it on your own schedule. Become a certified, trusted resource to come to for mental health concerns. Visit psychhub.com/learning to get started.